You think you know what loyalty looks like? Wait until you hear what this father's own children did to him, and what he did to find out the truth. Adrian Blackwell was worth $6 billion. His children drove cars that cost more than houses. But when Adrian dressed like a beggar and knocked on his own son's front door, nobody recognized him. Nobody let him in. And what happened on the streets that night showed Adrian who his children really were, and who they were not. Good to have you here, friends. Please like, subscribe, and hit that bell. Tell us where you're joining from in the comments. Atlanta, London, maybe Ghana or Barbados? We're curious. Now listen, I'm going to tell you something that's going to make your blood boil. But you need to hear it. Because what this family did, what these children did to their own father, is the kind of thing that makes you sit up straight and look at the people around you a little differently. Let me tell you about Adrian Blackwell.
Adrian was 67 years old. He was a big man, 6'2", 220 pounds, with a thick chest and heavy shoulders that made him look like a football player who never quite stopped being one. His skin was dark brown, smooth for his age except around his eyes, where the wrinkles fanned out like little roads going nowhere. He had a wide nose, a strong jaw, and a head of silver-white hair that he kept cut close. His hands were large, the knuckles scarred from years of work that came long before the money did. He wore simple clothes, a plain white shirt, dark trousers, leather shoes, but the watch on his wrist was a Patek Philippe worth more than most people's retirement savings. And if you looked closely at his belt, the buckle had his initials engraved in gold. That was Adrian, simple on the surface, expensive underneath. Adrian lived alone in a mansion in Buckhead, a wealthy neighborhood in Atlanta.
The house was ridiculous. 12,000 square feet, 7 bedrooms, a swimming pool in the back shaped like a kidney bean, and a 3-car garage with a Bentley, a Mercedes, and a Range Rover inside. The front door was solid mahogany with brass handles. The floors were white marble. The kitchen had 2 refrigerators, a wine cooler, and an island big enough to land a small airplane on. But the house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that crawls under your skin and stays there. Adrian's wife, Diane, had died 4 years earlier, pancreatic cancer. She went fast, diagnosed in September, gone by January. Diane was the kind of woman who made a room brighter just by being in it. She was small, 5'3", barely 120 pounds, with eyes the color of honey and a laugh that started deep in her belly and worked its way up like music. She wore her hair natural, big, curly, beautiful, and she always smelled like shea butter and vanilla. Every morning for 41 years, she made Adrian's coffee. 2 sugars, a little cream. She put it on the table next to his reading chair, and she kissed the top of his head, and she said the same thing every single day. "Morning, my love." Every single day. 41 years. Can you imagine? 14,965 mornings of that same kiss, that same cup, those same 3 words. When Diane died, Adrian kept putting out 2 coffee cups every morning. One for him, one for her chair. He did this for months before the housekeeper, a woman named Patricia, gently stopped setting the second cup out. Adrian didn't say anything about it. He just looked at the empty spot on the table and went on with his day. Now listen to me. Adrian Blackwell did not inherit his money. That is important. He built it. Every dollar. From nothing. His father was a janitor named George who swept floors at a public school in East Atlanta for 32 years. His mother, Vera, worked at a dry cleaner pressing other people's shirts. They lived in a brick duplex on a street where the streetlights didn't always work and the sidewalks had more cracks than concrete. Adrian shared a bedroom with his 2 brothers, a room so small that they slept in one bed head to foot and fought over the blanket every winter night. Adrian started working at 14. He mowed lawns after school, washed cars on weekends, swept the parking lot at a grocery store for $3 an hour. He saved every penny in a coffee can under the bed, the same bed he shared with his brothers. He could hear the coins shifting when he rolled over at night, and that sound, the soft clink of quarters and dimes, that sound meant hope. He put himself through Georgia State with scholarships and 2 part-time jobs. He started a construction company at 26 with $8,000 in savings and a used pickup truck. By 35, the company was building shopping centers. By 45, office towers. By 55, Adrian Blackwell Construction was one of the largest Black-owned construction firms in the Southeast, and Adrian was worth more money than his father could have imagined in 10 lifetimes. But this is the part that matters. Pay attention. Adrian never forgot where he came from. Never. He still wore simple clothes. He still ate the same breakfast his mother used to make: grits, scrambled eggs, toast with butter. He still tipped every waitress $20, no matter what the bill was. He still shook hands with the janitor in every building he walked into because his father was a janitor, and his father was the greatest man he ever knew. Adrian had 3 children, and this is where the story gets ugly. His oldest was a son named Julian, 38 years old, tall, handsome, sharp dresser. Julian drove a red Porsche and lived in a penthouse condo in Midtown with views of the skyline. He worked at Adrian's company, in theory. He had the title of Vice President of Development, but most days he came in at 11, left at 3, and spent the rest of his time at restaurants and clubs with people who laughed at his jokes because he was paying for the drinks. Julian wore designer shoes that cost $2,000 a pair. He had never polished a shoe in his life. The middle child was a daughter named Victoria, 35. She was beautiful, everybody said so, with Diane's honey-colored eyes and a closet full of clothes that could fill a department store. Victoria did not work. She had not worked a single day since college. She lived in a house in Buckhead that Adrian had bought for her, a 4-bedroom house with a pool and a gardener and a cleaning lady who came 3 times a week. Victoria spent her days shopping, going to brunch, and posting pictures of herself on social media with captions about gratitude and blessings, all while spending her father's money without ever once saying thank you. The youngest was a son named Marcus, 31. Marcus was different. He was quieter than his brother and sister, more thoughtful. He had Diane's softness in his face and Adrian's strength in his hands. He worked as a teacher at a public school in South Atlanta, 4th grade. He drove a Honda Civic. He lived in a 2-bedroom apartment. He was the only one of Adrian's children who had never asked for money. Not once, not a single time. Now, I need to tell you something about Julian and Victoria, and it's going to make your blood boil. After Diane died, something changed. Something ugly came crawling out. Julian and Victoria started calling more. Not to check on Adrian, no. To ask for money. Julian wanted a bigger office. Victoria wanted a kitchen renovation. Julian wanted Adrian to pay for a trip to Dubai. Victoria wanted a new car. Her Range Rover was 2 years old, and apparently that was ancient. They called and called and called, and every call started the same way. "Hey, Dad, how are you?" And within 30 seconds, it was always about money. Adrian gave. He always gave, because that is what fathers do. And because when Diane was alive, she was the one who said no. She was the guardrail. She was the one who would look at Julian and say, "You have a perfectly good car, drive it." She was the one who told Victoria, "I love you, baby, but no, you don't need another handbag that costs as much as a mortgage payment." Diane kept the balance, and when she died, the balance died with her. But what happened next, can you believe this, is what pushed Adrian to the edge. It was a Sunday evening in October. Adrian was sitting in his reading chair, the one by the window where Diane used to put his coffee. Patricia, the housekeeper, had gone home for the night. The house was quiet. Too quiet. Adrian was looking at his phone. No messages, no missed calls. He hadn't seen Julian in 3 weeks. He hadn't seen Victoria in a month. Marcus called every Sunday like clockwork, but Marcus lived across town and worked long hours. The last time all 3 children sat at his dinner table at the same time was Diane's funeral. Adrian put down his phone. He looked at the empty chair across from him. Diane's chair. and he thought about something she had said to him 2 weeks before she died. She was lying in the hospital bed, thin as paper, her beautiful hair gone from the chemo, her honey eyes still bright. She took his hand and said, "Adrian, promise me something. Promise me you'll make sure the children know what matters. Not the money, not the houses. What matters? Because I'm afraid, baby. I'm afraid the money is all they see." Adrian had said, "I promise." But sitting in that chair, alone, in that silent house, he knew he had not kept that promise. Not even close. And that is when Adrian Blackwell decided to do something that most people would call crazy. He was going to test his children. He was going to take off his watch, his nice clothes, his expensive shoes. He was going to dress like a man who had nothing. A homeless man, a beggar, a nobody. And he was going to show up at each of his children's doors and see what happened. He wanted to know the truth. Not the version they showed him when they wanted a check. The real truth. The truth that comes out when nobody is watching. But Adrian had no idea what he was about to discover. He started planning the next day. He told Patricia he was going out of town for a few days. Business trip, nothing unusual. He went to a thrift store on Memorial Drive, a place with bins of old clothes and a smell like dust and mothballs. He bought a pair of worn-out work boots with the sole separating from the toe. He bought faded jeans with a tear at the knee. A flannel shirt, gray and brown, missing a button at the collar. A baseball cap, dirty and bent. He stood in front of the mirror in his bathroom, this enormous bathroom with heated floors and a glass shower and towels that cost $80 each, and he looked at himself. He looked like his father. He looked exactly like George Blackwell coming home from a night shift at the school, tired and dusty, his work boots unlaced, his shirt untucked. Adrian stared at that reflection for a long time. His eyes burned. He touched the glass. "Let's see what they're really made of," he said. Now here is where the story takes a turn that nobody saw coming. Adrian drove his least flashy car, a 10-year-old Toyota Camry he kept in the garage for when Patricia needed to run errands, to Julian's building in Midtown. It was a Tuesday evening, around 7 o'clock. The sun was going down. The sky was pink and orange behind the glass towers, and the streets were busy with people coming home from work. Young professionals in nice clothes, walking fast, looking at their phones. Adrian parked 2 blocks away and walked to the building. He caught his reflection in a storefront window and stopped. The man looking back at him had his father's face, George Blackwell's face, the janitor, the man who swept floors and came home tired every night with dust on his shoes and chalk on his sleeves. Adrian had not thought about his father this much in years. But dressed like this, in these clothes on this sidewalk, he felt closer to George than he had since the old man died. He walked into Julian's building. The lobby was bright and clean. White marble floors, a crystal chandelier, fresh flowers on a glass table. The air smelled like expensive perfume. A doorman in a gray uniform stood behind a desk. He was a young man, maybe 25, with a name tag that said Derek. Derek looked at Adrian. His eyes started at the cap and moved down to the flannel shirt, the torn jeans, the broken boots. His expression shifted. Not unkind exactly, but guarded. The way a guard dog lifts its head when a stranger approaches the fence. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm here to see Julian Blackwell," Adrian said. He kept his voice low, rougher than normal. He didn't want to sound like himself. Derek's eyebrows went up slightly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I'm his father." Derek looked at him again. The torn jeans, the dirt under Adrian's fingernails. He had rubbed soil into his hands before leaving the house to make them look like working hands. Derek reached for the phone. "I'll call up. Name?" "Adrian." Derek dialed. The phone rang 3 times. Adrian could hear it faintly through the lobby, a small, tinny sound bouncing off marble walls. Julian picked up. Derek said, polite and professional. "Good evening, Mr. Blackwell. There's a gentleman here in the lobby who says he's your father. Name is Adrian." Pause. Adrian watched Derek's face. He saw the moment Julian responded. Derek's expression didn't change. He was too well trained for that. But something shifted behind his eyes. Something like discomfort. Derek hung up. He turned to Adrian. Mr. Blackwell says he's not expecting anyone this evening. He's asked me to let you know that he's unavailable. Not even his father is unavailable. Just, he's unavailable. Like Adrian was a delivery driver with the wrong address. Could you call him again? Adrian said. Tell him I just need a place to stay for one night. I don't need much. A couch, a floor, anything. Derek hesitated. You could see the conflict on his face. The job telling him to follow instructions, the human being inside him feeling something else entirely. He picked up the phone again. Mr. Blackwell, I apologize for bothering you again. The gentleman is asking if he could stay just for one night. He says he needs help. This time, Adrian could hear Julian's voice through the phone. Not the words, but the tone. Annoyed. Clipped. The same tone Julian used with waiters who brought the wrong appetizer. The same tone he used with anyone who couldn't do something for him. Derek hung up. His face was tight. He didn't look at Adrian when he spoke. I'm sorry, sir. Mr. Blackwell says he doesn't know you. He's asked me to call security if you don't leave the building. Adrian stood in that lobby for 15 seconds. 15 seconds. In those 15 seconds, he thought about Julian at 3 years old, running across the backyard in bare feet, screaming with laughter while Adrian chased him. He thought about Julian at 10, sitting on Adrian's lap in the construction trailer, asking how buildings stay up. He thought about Julian at 18, the night before college, when the boy hugged his father and said, I'm going to make you proud, Dad. 15 seconds. Then Adrian turned and walked out through the glass doors into the warm October air. His own son, his firstborn, had called security on him. And just when Adrian thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. He drove to Victoria's house in Buckhead, the house he had bought her, paid for in cash, $640,000, not including the renovation she had begged for last year. The house sat at the end of a quiet street lined with oak trees. The lawn was perfect. The gardener Adrian paid for saw to that. The front porch had 2 white rocking chairs and a row of potted ferns. A warm light glowed in the living room windows. Adrian parked the Camry at the curb and walked up the stone pathway. His broken boots scraped on the pavement. A motion sensor light clicked on and bathed him in cold white light. He rang the doorbell. A chime, 2 notes. The one Victoria had picked out herself because she said it sounded elegant. Footsteps inside. Then the door opened. Victoria was wearing a silk robe, cream-colored, probably cost $300, and matching slippers. Her hair was pulled up in a twist. She had a glass of red wine in her left hand. The television was on behind her, some reality show, bright colors and loud voices. She looked at Adrian. Her eyes moved fast. Cap, shirt, jeans, boots. Her face changed. Not recognition, not curiosity. Disgust. Her upper lip pulled back slightly, the way a person reacts to a bad smell. Can I help you? She said. And the way she said it, can you believe this? The way she said it was the way you talk to something you wish would go away. Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you, Adrian said. I don't have anywhere to stay tonight. I'm not asking for money, just a place to sit, a porch, a garage, anywhere safe. Just for one night. Victoria took a step backward into the house. I'm sorry. How did you even get into this neighborhood? There's a gate. I walked in behind a car. Well, you can't be here. This is a private community. I'm going to have to call the security patrol. Please, Adrian said. He said it the way his father used to say it, quiet, with dignity, the way a man asks for something when he has nothing left to offer in return. I'm just asking for one night. I won't bother you. I'll be gone by morning. Victoria looked at him for 2 seconds. 2 seconds of looking directly into her father's face. 2 seconds. Then she stepped back, and the door swung shut. Adrian heard the deadbolt turn, then the chain rattle into place. 2 locks. As if one wasn't enough. He stood on the porch. His eyes dropped to the welcome mat. A thick, expensive mat, cream and gold, with the word blessed written in cursive script. He looked at the potted ferns on either side of the door, green and healthy, watered twice a week by the gardener he paid for. He looked at the house number, 118. Brass numbers on a house with his name on the deed. His daughter. His little girl. The one who used to crawl into his lap during thunderstorms and press her face into his chest because the sound of his heartbeat made her feel safe. That girl had just locked him out of the house he gave her. Adrian walked back to the Camry. He sat in the driver's seat. He gripped the steering wheel. His knuckles ached. His eyes burned. But he didn't cry. Something had gone past crying. Something deeper than tears. He had spent 40 years building an empire so that his children would never know what it felt like to be hungry, to be cold, to be turned away. And they had taken that safety and turned it into a wall between themselves and every person who reminded them of where their father came from. But the biggest secret hadn't come out yet. Adrian had one more stop. Marcus, his youngest, the teacher, the one who drove a Honda Civic and never asked for a dime. It was almost 9 o'clock now. Dark. The city had quieted down. Adrian drove south, away from the glass towers and the gated communities, through neighborhoods where the lawns got smaller and the fences got taller and the streetlights got fewer. He passed a corner store with iron bars on the windows, a laundromat with a sign that flickered, a church with a message board out front that said, "God loves you even on your worst day." Marcus's apartment building was on a side street off Jonesboro Road. It was a 3-story brick building, nothing fancy, nothing falling apart. Just a building where regular people lived regular lives. No doorman, no marble lobby, no chandelier. Just a metal security door with a row of buzzers, a parking lot with a few cars, and a streetlight that hummed and flickered like it was trying to decide whether to stay on. Adrian stood at the door. He looked at the buzzer panel. Apartment 4B. He pressed the button and waited. "Yeah?" Marcus's voice came through the speaker, tinny and far away, like it was traveling through water. "Excuse me, sir, I'm sorry to bother you this late. I don't have anywhere to stay tonight. Is there any way I could use your couch or even just sit inside until morning? I don't need much." Silence on the other end. 3 seconds. 4. Adrian's heart hammered. Then, "Hold on. I'm coming down." Adrian heard footsteps through the speaker, then the click of a lock, then the door opened. Marcus was standing there in gray sweatpants and an old Georgia State t-shirt with a hole near the hem. His feet were bare on the cold tile. He had a pen behind his ear. He'd been grading papers, Adrian realized, and reading glasses pushed up on his forehead. He looked at the man in front of him. The dirty cap, the torn flannel, the worn-out boots with the sole coming apart. Marcus looked at his face. 3 seconds passed. In those 3 seconds, Adrian watched his youngest son's eyes move from confusion to surprise to understanding. It happened fast, like watching someone turn a key in a lock. His eyes widened. "Dad?" Adrian's disguise had fooled a doorman. It had fooled his own daughter who stood 3 feet away. But it did not fool Marcus. Not for 1 second. Because Marcus looked at people's faces, not their clothes. Because Marcus saw human beings, not appearances. Because Marcus was his mother's son. "Dad, what happened? Are you hurt? Why are you dressed like this?" Marcus reached out and grabbed Adrian's arm with both hands, pulling him through the door. "Come inside, right now. Come on." Adrian let himself be pulled into the building. The hallway smelled like floor cleaner and somebody's dinner. Fried plantain and rice, warm and rich. The walls were beige and bare, except for a fire extinguisher and a bulletin board with flyers for a neighborhood cookout and a tutoring program at the library. Marcus's apartment was on the 2nd floor. He opened the door and guided Adrian inside. The apartment was small. A living room with a brown couch, a coffee table covered in student papers and red pens, and a small television on a stand. The kitchen was barely big enough for one person to stand in. A 2-burner stove, a refrigerator that hummed loudly, a counter with a toaster and a jar of peanut butter. The bedroom door was open, showing an unmade bed, a nightstand with an alarm clock, and a stack of books so tall it leaned against the wall for support. Books everywhere. On the shelves, on the coffee table, on the kitchen counter, on the floor beside the couch. Children's picture books mixed with thick novels and worn-out teaching textbooks with sticky notes poking out from every chapter.
Marcus cleared the papers off the couch.
"Sit down," he said. "Sit down, Dad." Adrian sat. The couch was old. It sagged in the middle. It was the most comfortable thing he had felt all night. Marcus went to the kitchen. Adrian heard the refrigerator open, the clatter of containers, the clink of a glass being filled with water from the tap. Marcus came back with a glass of water and a plate, leftover chicken, rice, and green beans. Nothing fancy, nothing expensive. Just food, made with care, served by a person who saw a man in need and didn't ask questions first. "Eat," Marcus said. He sat on the arm of the couch and watched his father. "Then tell me what's going on." Adrian looked at his youngest son. This man who lived in a 2-bedroom apartment smaller than Adrian's closet, who drove a 10-year-old Honda Civic with a dent in the back fender,
Who taught 4th graders for $42,000 a year and spent half his salary buying school supplies out of his own pocket because the school budget didn't cover enough pencils and notebooks. This man who had never once, not one single time in 31 years, asked his father for money. This man had been the only one to open his door. Adrian ate. The chicken was seasoned with something simple: garlic, pepper, a little paprika. The rice was slightly overcooked. The green beans were from a can. It was the best meal Adrian Blackwell had eaten in years. Because it tasted the way food is supposed to taste when someone gives it to you, not because they want something from you, but because they care about you. That flavor, the flavor of care, you can't buy it at any restaurant in the world. Then Adrian told Marcus everything. The disguise, the thrift store clothes, Julian's building, Derek the doorman, the phone call, the security threat. Then Victoria, the silk robe, the 2-second look, the door closing, the deadbolt, the chain, the welcome mat that said, "Blessed." Marcus listened without interrupting. He sat on the arm of the couch with his arms crossed, his reading glasses still pushed up on his forehead, and he listened the way good teachers listen, with his whole body, his whole attention, leaning forward slightly, processing every word. His face didn't change much while Adrian talked. Marcus was not the type to shout or curse or slam things, but Adrian watched his son's hands. They tightened. Slowly, one finger at a time, they curled into fists on his knees. And his jaw, that soft jaw, Diane's jaw, it set hard, like something was locking into place inside him. When Adrian finished, the apartment was quiet. The refrigerator hummed. A car passed outside. Somewhere in the building, a door closed. Marcus was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Does it surprise you?" "Does it surprise you?" Adrian asked back. Marcus looked at his hands, his teaching hands, stained with red ink from grading papers.
"No," he said quietly. "It doesn't surprise me. And that's the part that hurts the most. Because it means I already knew. I already knew who they were. And I didn't say anything. That's not your fault. Maybe not, but Mom would have said something. Mom would have said it years ago." They sat together in that small apartment until past midnight. Marcus made coffee, strong, black, 2 sugars for his father, a little cream, the way Diane used to make it. The apartment filled with the smell of coffee and something else, something warm and invisible. The smell of a son taking care of his father, the way the father once took care of the son. They talked about Diane, about the coffee she made every morning, about her laugh, about the way she said, "Morning, my love," 14,000 times and never once made it sound routine. They talked about George the janitor and Vera pressing shirts.
About the brick duplex on the bad street. About the coffee can full of coins under the bed, the sound of quarters shifting at night. Marcus said, "Mom told me something before she died. She was holding my hand. She could barely talk. But she said, 'Marcus, your father built everything with his hands. Make sure you build something with your heart.' I think about that every single day. Every day I walk into that classroom, I hear her voice." Adrian's eyes filled. He reached over and put his hand on his son's shoulder. This big hand,
scarred and rough, the hand of a man who started with nothing, and he held on. "She would be proud of you," Adrian said. "She is proud of you. She'd be heartbroken about Julian and Victoria. She would. But she wouldn't give up on them." Adrian looked at his son. "No, she wouldn't." They sat with that truth, the weight of it, the hope buried inside it. The next morning, Adrian went home. He showered, changed into his regular clothes, and made 2 phone calls. One to Julian, one to Victoria. He invited them both to dinner at the house on Saturday evening. He said it was important. He said he needed to discuss the family's future. Julian said, "Is this about the company?" with that quick, hungry tone. Victoria said, "Should I bring anything?" in that sweet voice she used when she thought money was on the table. Adrian said, "Just bring yourselves." Saturday came. The air was warm for October. The magnolia trees in the front yard still had their leaves, dark green and waxy, and the late afternoon sun made the white columns of the house glow. Julian arrived first, at 5 o'clock sharp, in his red Porsche. He came up the walkway in a custom navy suit, checking his phone, barely looking at the house he grew up in. He walked through the front door without knocking, because he never knocked, because this was his father's house and therefore, in his mind, partially his. Victoria arrived 20 minutes later in her white Range Rover. She wore a designer dress, cream-colored, the kind that wrinkles if you look at it wrong, and heels that clicked on the marble floor like a metronome. She brought a bottle of wine from her personal collection. She set it on the counter with a smile and said, "For the table." Marcus arrived last at 5:30 in his Honda Civic with the dent in the back fender. He wore a button-down shirt, light blue, simple, that he had ironed himself that morning. He didn't bring wine. He brought a tin of brownies that a student's mother had made for him that week, wrapped in aluminum foil with a sticky note that said, "Thank you, Mr. Webb." Wrong last name, but the thought was there. They sat in the dining room. Patricia had prepared the meal: roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, cornbread. Every dish was Diane's recipe. Patricia had found them in the recipe box that Diane kept on the kitchen counter. A wooden box with index cards inside, each one written in Diane's round handwriting, some stained with butter or tomato sauce from years of use. Patricia followed every recipe to the letter. The table was set the way Diane used to set it. White tablecloth, the good china plates with the gold rim, cloth napkins folded into triangles, a small glass vase of yellow flowers in the center. 2 white candles, lit. For the first 20 minutes, Julian and Victoria talked about themselves. Julian talked about a development deal in Midtown, a mixed-use project, condos and retail, big margins. He wanted Adrian to fund the initial phase. He threw numbers around, 8 figures, projections, return on investment, the way a man throws confetti at a party, carelessly, in every direction. Victoria talked about a trip she was planning to the Amalfi Coast. She had found a villa with a pool and a private chef, and she described it the way a child describes Christmas morning. They did not ask Adrian how he was doing. They did not ask about his health. They did not ask about Patricia or the house or the garden. They did not mention Diane. Her name did not come up once. Her recipes were on the table, her flowers were in the vase, her candles were burning, and nobody said her name. Marcus sat quietly. He ate his food. He looked at his father once, a long, steady look, and Adrian met his eyes and nodded. Once. Small. Marcus understood. After dessert, sweet potato pie, Diane's recipe, the filling slightly spicy the way she always made it. Adrian pushed his plate aside. He stood up slowly. He looked at his 3 children sitting at the table where their mother had served 10,000 meals. He reached for his wrist, unclasped the Patek Philippe, and set it on the white tablecloth next to his plate. The watch clicked softly against the china. "Tuesday night," Adrian said. His voice was steady, calm, the kind of calm that comes before something breaks. "I put on old clothes, thrift store clothes, and I went to each of your homes. I knocked on your doors. I looked like a man with nothing, a man who needed help. And I asked each of you for one night, just one night. The room went silent. Not just quiet. Silent. The kind of silence that presses against your ears. Julian's fork stopped midway to his mouth. A piece of sweet potato hung in the air. Victoria's wine glass paused at her lips, the red wine trembling slightly against the crystal. Marcus set his napkin on the table and folded his hands. "Julian," Adrian said, turning to his eldest, "you had your doorman call security on me. You didn't come down to the lobby. You didn't look at my face. You told a 25-year-old kid in a uniform to throw your own father out of the building because I looked like I had nothing to offer you." Julian's face went white.
Not red. White. The color drained out of him like someone had pulled a plug. He set the fork down. The piece of sweet potato fell onto his plate.
"Dad, I had no idea. The doorman just said some homeless guy was in the lobby. I get people buzzing up all the time trying to sell things or ask for money. I didn't know it was you." "That's the point," Adrian said. His voice was still calm, devastating in its calm. "You didn't know it was me because you never came downstairs to look. A man came to your building, a human being, not a homeless guy, a human being, asking for one night of shelter, and you couldn't be bothered to ride the elevator down and look at his face. You just told a kid in a uniform to make the problem go away." Julian opened his mouth. Nothing came out. "Victoria," Adrian said, turning to his daughter, "you looked right at me. You were 3 feet away. You closed the door and locked it. The deadbolt and the chain. On the front porch of a house I paid for." Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "Daddy, I'm sorry. I was scared. I didn't recognize—" "You weren't scared. You were disgusted. I saw your face. I know what disgust looks like. Your mother never looked at a single human being that way in her entire life." Victoria put her face in her hands. Adrian picked up the watch from the table and held it up. "This watch costs more than what Marcus makes in a year. And Marcus, who has the least of all of you, was the only one who opened his door. He was the only one who looked at my face instead of my clothes. He fed me. He gave me coffee the way your mother used to make it. He sat with me until midnight." The room was completely still. The yellow flowers in the vase didn't move. The candles didn't flicker. Adrian looked at Julian, then at Victoria. He said, "Your mother asked me to make sure you understood what matters. I failed. She was right to be afraid. The money blinded you. It made you small. It made you selfish. And I let it happen, because it was easier to write checks than to have hard conversations." He paused. Then he said the line that none of them would ever forget. "You can build a person a mansion, but if they never learn to open the door for a stranger, all you've built is a beautiful cage." Julian was staring at the table. His jaw was trembling. Victoria was crying. Real tears now, not performance tears. Marcus sat still, his hands flat on the table, looking at his plate. "I'm restructuring everything," Adrian said. "The company, the trust, the properties. I'm not cutting you off. But the days of blank checks are over. You want to be part of this family's future? You earn it. Not with deals and developments. With character. With how you treat people who can't do anything for you." He sat down. He was tired. The kind of tired that lives in your bones. Julian left first. He didn't say goodbye. He just stood up, put on his jacket, and walked out. His Porsche roared to life in the driveway and was gone. Victoria stayed. She sat at the table for a long time, crying quietly. Then she looked up at Adrian and said, "I'm sorry, Daddy. I'm so sorry." And for once, Adrian believed she meant it. Not because she was afraid of losing the money, because she had just seen herself the way the world sees her, and she didn't like what she saw. Marcus stayed the latest. He helped Patricia clear the table. He washed the dishes by hand, even though there was a dishwasher, because Diane always said food tastes better when the dishes are washed by hand. He dried each plate with a cloth towel, stacked them neatly, and put them away. Before he left, Marcus stood in the doorway and looked at his father. "You did the right thing," Marcus said. "Mom would have been proud of tonight." "Would she?" "She'd have done it 10 years ago," Marcus said, smiling a little. But yeah, she'd be proud. Adrian laughed. A real laugh. The first one in months.
You sound just like her.
Good, Marcus said. That's the best thing you could ever say to me. Over the next 6 months, things changed. Slowly. Painfully. The way a broken bone heals, not all at once, but day by day, with aching and patience and the stubborn refusal to stop trying. Julian quit the company. Not because Adrian fired him, because Julian looked at himself honestly for the first time in his adult life and could not stand what he saw. For 2 weeks after the dinner, he didn't leave his condo. He sat on his expensive couch in his expensive living room and looked at his expensive view and felt empty. The penthouse that he had been so proud of suddenly felt like what it was. A glass box in the sky with nobody in it. Then one morning he woke up early, 6 o'clock, which for Julian was practically the middle of the night, and he drove to a Habitat for Humanity build site in West Atlanta. He didn't tell anyone he was coming. He just showed up.
He wore jeans and work boots. Real ones, from the same thrift store Adrian had visited. And he walked up to the site manager and said, "I don't know how to do anything, but I can learn. Tell me where to start." The site manager handed him a hammer and pointed at a frame. Julian swung the hammer and missed the nail. Swung again and hit his thumb. He yelped. The other volunteers, regular people, working people, people who didn't drive Porsches, looked at him and laughed. Not in a mean way, in the way people laugh when someone is trying and failing and trying again. Julian laughed too. It was the first time he had laughed at himself in years. He came back the next morning, and the morning after that, and every morning for the next 3 months. His hands blistered. The blisters tore. The torn skin calloused over. His shoulders ached. His back hurt. He lost 12 pounds. His custom suits hung in the closet unworn. He didn't miss them. By spring, Julian was leading a crew. He was framing walls, hanging drywall, running electrical wire. He was building houses for families who had nothing. Single mothers, elderly couples, veterans. And for the first time in his life, he was sweating and dirty and tired at the end of the day. And he felt good. Actually good. Not the hollow kind of good that comes from a new car or an expensive dinner. The solid kind that sits in your chest like a warm stone. He called Adrian one evening. His voice was different. Quieter. Steadier. Like a man who had finally stopped performing and started living. Like a man who had found the ground after years of floating. "Dad," he said, "I get it now. I finally understand what Grandpa George knew, what Mom knew, what Marcus always knew. The work is the point. Not what it pays, what it builds." Adrian closed his eyes and smiled. "Your mother would be proud of that sentence." "I know. That's why I said it." Victoria sold her Range Rover. She bought a used Lexus. She started volunteering at a women's shelter in Buckhead. Ironic, isn't it, that the woman who closed her door on a stranger was now opening doors for women who had nowhere else to go. She went 3 times a week. She brought clothes from her own closet, designer dresses and shoes and handbags, and she gave them to women who needed to look professional for job interviews. She didn't post about it on social media. She didn't tell anyone. She just did it. One evening, Victoria called Adrian. She was crying. "Daddy," she said, "a woman came into the shelter tonight. She had 2 little girls with her. They had 1 bag between the 3 of them. And the little one, she was maybe 4 years old. She looked up at me and said, 'Is this our house now?'" Victoria's voice broke. "And I thought about you, standing on my porch, asking for 1 night. And I closed the door." "Don't carry that forever," Adrian said gently. "Just carry the lesson. Don't forget it." Marcus kept teaching. He didn't change because he didn't need to. But Adrian started visiting his classroom once a month. He would sit in the back of the room, in one of those little chairs designed for 9-year-olds, his big frame folded up like a giant in a dollhouse, and he would listen to Marcus teach. The children loved it. They called Adrian Mr. B and asked him to read stories aloud during free time. He read picture books in his deep voice, doing all the character voices, and the children laughed and climbed on him and asked him to come back every day.
One afternoon, a girl named Amara, a tiny thing with 2 braids and glasses too big for her face, walked up to Adrian after class. She tugged on his sleeve. "Mr. B," she said, "are you really Mr. Marcus's daddy?" "I am," Adrian said. Amara tilted her head. "You must be really proud of him. He's the best teacher in the whole school." Adrian looked at his son, who was at his desk, erasing the whiteboard, humming something that sounded like one of Diane's hymns. "I am proud of him," Adrian said. "He's the best person I know." That Thanksgiving, all 3 children came home. Julian arrived in a pickup truck, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. His hands were calloused. Victoria arrived in her used Lexus, carrying a casserole she had made herself, the first dish she had ever cooked from scratch in her life. Marcus arrived in his Honda Civic, with a stack of handmade thank you cards from his students. They sat around the dining room table. Patricia cooked the turkey, Diane's recipe, the big one, the one that could feed the neighborhood. Adrian set the table the way Diane always did. White tablecloth, good plates, cloth napkins, yellow flowers. And this time, the conversation was different. Julian talked about a house he'd helped build for a single mother of 3.
Victoria talked about a woman at the shelter who had just gotten her first job in 2 years. Marcus talked about a boy in his class who had learned to read that month after struggling for a whole year. Nobody talked about money. Nobody asked for anything. They just sat together and ate and laughed and told stories about Diane. How she burned the cornbread that one Thanksgiving. How she danced in the kitchen when she thought nobody was watching. How she sang off-key in church and didn't care one bit. After dinner, Marcus helped wash the dishes by hand. Julian dried. Victoria put them away. Adrian sat in his reading chair by the window and watched his 3 children standing side by side in his kitchen, doing the dishes together. And he felt something he hadn't felt since Diane died. He felt her there. In the room. In the laughter. In the clink of plates and the sound of water running and the smell of turkey and cornbread and yellow flowers. He closed his eyes. He whispered, "I kept my promise, Diane. I finally kept my promise." And on the little table beside his chair, where Patricia always left his morning coffee, Adrian noticed something. A second cup. He didn't know who put it there. He looked at Patricia. She shook her head. He looked at Marcus, who was drying a plate in the kitchen. Marcus caught his eye and smiled. He said, 2 sugars, a little cream, the way she made it. Adrian picked up the cup. The coffee was warm. He took a sip. And for the first time in 4 years, he didn't feel alone. Little Amara, the girl from Marcus's class, made Adrian a card the following week. On the front, she had drawn a picture of a big man sitting in a tiny chair, surrounded by children. Inside, in careful handwriting with a few misspelled words, she wrote, "Dear Mr. B, my mama says rich people are mean, but you are the nicest person I know. So maybe rich is not about money. Maybe rich is about how big your heart is. Love, Amara." Adrian framed that card. He hung it in his home office, right next to the portrait of Diane, the one where she's smiling with her big curly hair and her honey-colored eyes. And every morning, when he sat in his reading chair with his coffee, 2 cups on the table now, always 2, he read those words. Maybe rich is not about money. Maybe rich is about how big your heart is. I hope this story stays with you for a while. Please like, share, and subscribe. Tell us in the comments what you would have done differently. We love reading your thoughts. Until next time.